Hi, I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this Nutcracker applique block. So I have a bunch of free Christmas applique patterns at shinyhappyworld.com. They're all free. So far we've got Santa and Mrs. Claus, we have an elf, there's a reindeer and a snowman and a gingerbread man. So this Nutcracker is going to join all of those, and you can use these patterns to make all kinds of different Christmas projects. There are links on the site to free patterns for stockings, for tote bags, for placemats, all kinds of things that you can use these patterns for. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to assemble all the pieces in this Nutcracker block. So this is a fairly complicated block. There are a lot of pieces here. And I just wanted to point out one quick thing, and that is that this is a design that is perfect for a little bit of fussy cutting. So for most of the fabrics, I would recommend that you use a tone-on-tone print. Because there are so many pieces in here, you don't want a busy fabric that's going to compete with all of those individual shapes. So for most of these, I've used blue on blue, black on gray, yellow, two different shades of yellow, different shades of green, and that just helps those pieces all read as separate pieces. But one thing that this pattern does work really, really well for is this little emblem here in the middle. Instead of appliquing on the tree, if you have some Christmas fabric, you could fussy cut this kind of doorway shape, this oval that's flattened at the bottom, and just find a little piece of the fabric that has the perfect little Christmas design on it. And you could fussy cut that and at least eliminate that tiny little bit of applique, but it would also be a fun way to make a set of nutcrackers that all have different images. So if you had a piece of Christmas fabric that had a lot of different motifs on it, you could give them a different motif, each a different motif from that same collection, and it would be a really fun look to have a quilt full of nutcrackers for that. But here's how to make this guy. All right, before we get started putting together the Nutcracker block, I just want to give you a quick look at how I do Quilt As You Go. Since this is one of my free patterns, you might not be familiar with, this might be the first Shiny Happy World pattern you've ever made, so I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. My Quilt As You Go method is a little bit different than most of what you see. So I quilt the background block to the batting, and then I do the applique on top of that, and then I do all of the outline stitching, and then I trim the blocks down to size, sew them all together, and then I attach the back. And I only do quilting along the seams. I stitch in the ditch, or sometimes I'll stitch a little bit to the side of it, to the seams that are joining the blocks together. That's the only quilting that goes all the way through to the back side of the quilt, and then I bind it just like I bind any other quilt. So a lot of people ask if that doesn't make the seams too bulky. It doesn't. If you find that it is making them bulkier than you would like, one trick you can do is use decorative stitching along for that final row of quilting. And I've got a tutorial on my website that gives you some tips for the kinds of decorative stitches that work well for that, and they just mash those seams down, and because they're wider, they'll mash that down. But really, I don't usually do that, and you don't need to. I just found that if you use a thin cotton batting, it does not make as much bulk as you think it would make. So now I'm going to show you how to put the block together, how to layer the pieces. Now this guy, he's got a lot of pieces, this Nutcracker. And if this is the very first one of my patterns you've ever done, you might want to start with a simpler pattern. I have a bunch of Christmas patterns that are all free, and some of them only have like 4 or 5 pieces to them. This has got 23 pieces. So we're going to use a light box for this. I do love using a light box to position my pieces. You don't have to use a light box. If you don't have one, you don't have to use one. I will tell you that I'm only doing a demonstration on this one just using the light box. For most of my patterns, I have a demonstration both with and without. But for this one, I'm really just going to demonstrate it with the light box. But there are other tutorials at shinyhappyworld.com that will show you how to do it if you don't have a light box. I do have all of the pieces marked, so if you don't have a light box, I've got all of the positioning lines on the pieces. So if you're using a light box, you can ignore almost all of these dotted lines on your pieces. And if you don't have a light box, you'll want to transfer those to the fabric side before you peel off the paper backing. For those using a light box, the only piece that you need to do that with is the teeth, and that is piece number 13, and it has this grid on it, and that's the lines showing you where you're going to need to do just some straight line stitching with black thread just to get those lines in there for his teeth. So I've just used a Sharpie fine tip marker. It doesn't matter that it's permanent because I'm going to stitch right over that with black thread over those black lines, so you will never see those lines. And if anybody does see them, it'll just look like stitching. So let us get started. I've got my placement guide. On the bottom, I've got my light box turned on to the brightest setting. I've got my placement guide, and then I have a silicone mat here, and we're going to layer all of these pieces right on top of that silicone mat, and then we're going to fuse them in place and then let it cool, and then we'll peel that off, and it'll peel off just one big applique piece that we can then set on a block and do the permanent fuse in place. So one more thing, when you're doing these light box placements, using a light box for it, these numbers on the pattern pieces, in addition to telling you what piece is what, they also tell you what order you're going to place them in. So we're going to start with piece number 1, which is the top of his hat, and you just line it up right on top of it. Number 2 is some of his wild hair over on the side here. And number 3 is over on this side. And number 4 is his face. And you can see if you were not using a light box, you'd have a lot of lines there to transfer all those detail pieces for his face. There we go. All right. Number 5 is the brim of his hat. And number 6 is his snazzy gold hat band. All right, now we've got a little decorative emblem to put in there, and we can see through here. I'm not sure if you can see it on the video. If you ever have trouble seeing the lines through it, just push the pieces down until they're actually making contact with the glass of the plate, and that will make it much easier for those lines to shine through the fabric. So this goes right in there. And then we have a little teeny itty bitty tree trunk. And then a little Christmas tree. All right, that's the top part there. Now, we're going to go down to his shoulders. Piece number 10 is one shoulder. And 11 is his shoulder on the other side. And 12 is his body. This overlaps those shoulder pieces just a smidge. Okay, number 13 is those scary teeth I've always thought that Nutcracker teeth are a little on the scary side. No, I just bumped that. All right, 14 is his beard. And that just overlaps that bottom flap on the teeth there. All right, now we've got some eyebrows, 15. And again, if you're having trouble seeing the lines, just push it down to make contact. And then 16 is the other shaggy eyebrow. And 17 is one eye. And 18 is the other eye, I should say the whites of his eyes. And 19 is his nose. $20 is one fancy mustache. And 21 is the other half of his mustache. And he's looking fairly disturbing right now, so let's give him some pupils in those eyes. So 22. The pupils are identical, it doesn't really matter which one goes where. And 23. All right, so all of the pieces are layered in place. I'm going to carefully lift up the silicone mat and carry it over to my ironing board, fuse everything in place right on the mat, and then wait for it to cool, and then I'll peel it up and it will come up. All of those little itty bitty pieces will be fused together. Oops, I bumped. No, I didn't. I moved my thing. Don't do that. So all of those will be fused together so you can pick it up and position it on your block exactly where you want it, and have them all be one piece that you're moving around in there. So after I get that fused onto the block, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. I'm going to outline stitch all of these pieces, and then I will bring it back here and show you the finished block. All right, here's the finished Nutcracker block. I've done all of the outline stitching on it. I also added some catch lights to his eyes. I just used a little bit of fabric paint. I've got a tutorial showing you a lot of different methods. You can use fabric paint, you can use machine embroidery, you can use hand embroidery, and the post that goes with that, and there's a link to that in the pattern instructions here that goes over all the different ways to add that little light to the eyes. So that's the Nutcracker. You can either add this to all of the other free Christmas applique patterns and make a Christmas quilt, or because Nutcrackers come in all different shapes and colors and designs, you could make this same block multiple times and just make a quilt that is all Nutcracker blocks, and just use different colors for the hair, the skin, and his outfit, different emblems on his hat. You could have a lot of fun with that, and if you do it, I would love to see it. I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World. I'll see you next time.